thing.
And the guys needed to
Like a 2-hour trustee presentation today.
Okay. Folks, we're going to start, if we could. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm calling the June 23rd, 2015 meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee to order. First of all, Chairperson Clarkin could not make the meeting this evening, so I'll be sitting in her place. So we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could all please rise. Way over there. We need a flag.
Can't see it.
One moment for the flag. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Avanzato?
Here.
Mr. Blasbach?
Here.
Mrs. Clarkin? Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. McGovern?
Here.
Mrs. Held? Olvig. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick note, there is a sign-up for citizens' comments if anyone would like to speak. And Madam Clerk, could you please call the calendar?
On Tuesday, August 11th, 2015, there will be a school committee work session at 7 p.m. at the North Kingstown High School. And on Tuesday, August 25th, 2015, there will be a school committee business meeting at 7 p.m. at North Kingstown High School.
Thank you. Presentations and recognitions. I know Mrs. Avanzato had a couple things she wanted to mention.
Yes, received this information from our previous chairperson, Kim Page, so thank you, Kim, for staying in the loop. I want to recognize Bethany Nunnery, who came in 4th at the New Balance National Outdoor Track Championship in North Carolina this past weekend. She ran the 2-mile, which in Rhode Island is the 3,200 meters, and she's considered an elite runner. And in addition, from girls track, we have the 4x800 meter relay. Bethany Nunnery came in 1st. And then we have Megan McGuire, Emma McIntyre, and Katarina Ho, new school record of 9:18:64. Also, Teresa Bolebruch, I hope I'm saying that right, first, say that again? Bolebrook. First in the 100-meter hurdles. Megan McGuire, 5th in the 800-meter. Emma Sammartino, 9th in the 800-meter. And Teresa Bolebrook again, 2nd in the 300-meter hurdles. Katarina Ho was 3rd in the 1,500 meter. Bethany, again, was 4th in the 3,000 meter. Tracy Kurdziel was 6th in the discus throw. Brooke Onmonsky was 5th in the high jump. And Paige Alausen was 2nd in javelin. So congratulations, girls track. You did a great job.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Oh, thank you. I just, I don't know if it was on there, but I did have the opportunity to attend the girls softball championship, game 3, which unfortunately was a heartbreaking 3-2 loss, but it was exciting games, and the team had a great season. At least congratulate them for making the state championship finals, and it was a nice effort, and just congratulate them for making that far. And I think we also had the Gatorade Player of the Year in softball from North Kingstown as well. So I don't know her name off the top of my head, but congratulations to her.
Rachel Cantor.
Rachel Cantor. Congratulations to her for that.
Thank you. Do we have anyone who signed up for citizens' comments? Okay. First, and if I could just note globally, if you could each please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and please state your name and your address for the record, please. First on the list is Joseph Jackson.
Good evening. Joseph Jackson, 56 Hidden Lake Drive. I'd like to talk in regards to the hockey program and gymnastics program funding. It's been my concern for many years about equality, making sure we raise our children, all of us. We teach them from when they're younger, fight for what you believe in, stand behind, be respectful, and the judicial systems that are in place will stand behind you and hopefully come up with a fair result, whether it favors you or not. You have to at least attempt to resolve this situation. I firmly believe that I have a wide range of experience in athletics and academics with being a parent, raising children. I had a daughter that went here and is now in college due to the great work of the school committee and the teachers and, obviously the parents, and was also a successful athlete. And my son also is an athlete and is well on his way to becoming a fine young man, and hopefully will continue to proceed through college and so forth, so on. But I do believe that it's not as difficult as a lot of people think. We're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. I believe respectfully that hard work and commitment are all things that we talk about and we preach. And now it's time to do it. It's time to put aside personal feelings, personal thoughts, and treat kids equally. And you realistically cannot put a dollar amount on what it means for a student to be able to represent his school or her school, the pride that comes with that. Some of the things that athletes learn when they're on a program, on a team, such as commitment, how to succeed, how to be respectful, how to lose, how to win, relationships that come out of this. Now, I have a son that doesn't play multiple sports. Without this sport, I believe he's a young man that needs direction. And he gets this direction and understands the scope of what it takes due to this sport. You cannot understand it until you see it. If you're a parent that is, whether it's been a spelling bee or on a roll, whatever it is, and you sit down and you look across that table and you see your son or daughter and the smile on their face from whether it's getting an A- on a test, winning a spelling bee, winning a face-off, kicking a goal in soccer, whatever it may be, you're very proud of that individual moment. And realistically, those moments add up to so much more, so much learning that has to take place. It has to, because not everybody is going to have a different outlet. They don't all have the ability or the chemistry or the knowledge inside their brain to be able to do 10 different things. Structure is hugely important in a lot of kids' lives. It keeps them out of trouble. It teaches them how to, their grades are more important because of the athletics in their head. I know for a fact with my son, when I sit there and say, you're not going to play hockey. I don't care what the program says, mom and dad say, and coach says, or team rules say, you know, if this grade isn't better, you sit. Well, guess what? It has an effect. And the money that is needed to fund this has to be there. It has to be. Because sooner or later, the well runs dry. Anyone that's been around in athletics long enough, whether it's rec softball, rec baseball, little league, you can only go to people so often for money and for help. And sooner or later, the economy goes down, guess what? People that used to donate 200 donate 50. The funding goes away. And it's right back here at that point, even more. And it's girls hockey, gymnastics, whatever sport it is. We need to really do this. We cannot continue to be passive. And I'm not saying that everyone believes it's passive to do that, but I think it's important that we keep these kids on an equal basis. It really is. We have middle school sports. We have all kinds of different avenues here that we use in this town to help support our school program from top to bottom. And I've always been someone that has always preached and believed in saying how you feel. And I would feel personally extremely disappointed if there was not some sort of success story coming out of all this work. And that's also from you guys. You guys work very hard at this. I know you do. And I know that we're asking for you to work and dig a little deeper. So please, on behalf of everyone, not just the students that are in this school right now, but the ones that are coming up, the ones that are in kindergarten, first grade, second, this isn't going to go away. This is just small sports, so to speak. You only have 3 programs. It's not going to go away. So we have to get a long-term goal, long-term planning. And we have to get that in effect. And I apologize.
Yeah.
I've always
Give
been
you some
one
leeway. I just want
to run my mouth, and when I get going, I go. They all know me. But that's the truth. It's not going to go away. If you are thinking in your head that this is just going to go away, it's not. It's not going to disappear. People are not just going to give up, because the parents that are coming up behind us, and eventually it could become soccer, it could become other things. And just briefly, if I may, please, I made a couple quick notes also about other towns and cities that are in the same type of situations.
If you could, I mean, I've let you go about 5-6 minutes.
But I think that, you know, there's not a lot of people here. Give me one more minute, please. You know, they do some pay-to-play type of stuff in some major cities here. They do different avenues. They found different ways to do things. And that's all I'm asking for, is to find the way to make it happen. And I would greatly appreciate that, and I appreciate you listening to me and letting me say my piece. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Greg Mancini?
Thank you. Greg Mancini, 61 Main Street. Just as a kind of a procedural thing, I don't, you know, I'm sure you're sick of hearing me, but last week, or last school committee meeting, you had citizens' comments, and then you spoke, and people on the dais spoke, and you may want to think about giving citizens the opportunity to rebut, because last time there were several inaccuracies that we would have liked to rebut, and I think that helps you make a better and a more informed decision. For example, it was said from the dais that there's a couple of districts that fully fund all their sports, including hockey, and hockey is 26 out of 29 school districts that fund hockey, and hopefully that would be somewhat persuasive to you, and there are other arguments too. I don't want to bore you with my time, but I do want to make sure that if you're going to make a decision, you make it based on the facts. So at some point, you may want to reconsider having citizens have an opportunity to, I don't know, rebut, correct the record. Correct the record's kind of strong, but anyways, a couple of the comments. Last time also, I kind of felt we got lumped into this business partnership. And that took our funding away, and we acknowledge that from a historical standpoint. But we have nothing against the business partnership. We wish them well. We didn't think that we should have our funding should have been eliminated to create that particular program. I'm sure it's a fine program, although obviously half of the program is supposed to raise money for sports, and that didn't work out, and we understand those things happen sometimes. But we have nothing against them. We just don't think that we should have been the sacrificial lamb to fund that program. And we've always said that our proposal and our request is really revenue neutral. So we don't think that, I appreciate the fact that there was dialogue on the podium to talk about finding the money and priorities, but we always felt that our proposal was revenue neutral. Having said that, I know Mr. Jones talked about an amount of up to $35,000 for a possible funding for the additional funds for these sports. I did a brief survey with the other two sports, and based on what I've learned, to fully fund these three sports would take an extra $22,000. I don't think that's a lot of money. And I can't believe that we can't find the money, particularly when the last 3 to 4 years we've had surpluses here. I don't think that's asking for too much. In fact, it's $22,000. If you did it for 18, I'd say we got a deal if you're willing to do that. And you probably won't hear from me again on this issue. And you won't hear from me again unless I'm here to support you, of course. So I don't know if you can find that type of revenue. I don't think it's a lot. It still requires to do a little fundraising, but I think that, we're willing to do our part. I think we've shown we're willing to do our part. And I think that we want to be fair and realistic, but certainly persistent. So we'd like you to consider or ask you to find the $22,000 that could fund those three programs. And I think that everyone would be happy. So if anyone has questions, I'm more than happy to take them, but I don't think you're going to. So. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Amy Coleman.
Amy Coleman, 71 John Scott Lane. I'm here on behalf of a group of parents who helped spearhead the parent side of the full-day kindergarten effort, and we just wanted to express our support for the hockey teams and the gymnastics team's request for equitable funding tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of the list. If there's anyone who wants to jump in, I'd certainly allow it. Okay, thank you, folks. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Thank you. First, Mrs. Skerry, if you could briefly stand for a moment, I'd like to introduce you to the committee. Mrs. Skerry, Karen Skerry is tonight is on the agenda to be the principal of the Clinical Day program. She has extensive experience in behavioral interventions, program leadership, and staff supervision in similar programs at the Bradley School and in Tiverton. She was the unanimous first choice of our search team, led by Dr. Pizzullo, and included Dr. Humbert, Dr. Carson, various administrators, teachers, parents. So it is my hope that you will approve this evening. Thank you. And I also would like to commend the business department at North Kingstown High School and the leadership of the high school. I'm pleased to announce that the high school has full approval for the Prepare Rhode Island application to jumpstart our business, finance, career, and technical program at North Kingstown High School. Sharon Lee, the leader of the Office of Multiple Pathways at RIDE, called to tell us and about the good news, and mentioned that the team was very impressed and rarely seen such an impressive application for any such program. And they were very impressed with the vision put forth. And they are happy to award North Kingstown, the school department, $250,000 in grant funding. And I want to thank Barbara Jackson and Elizabeth Jardine of Workforce Performance Solutions. They took on the leadership role of writing the grant along with Rich Garland, one of our business teachers. And that combination, the vision that they put forth, was incredibly impressive. And that all happened, the notice for the grant application and all. I mean, we had a sense things were coming, but once we got the word on it, we really had about 3 weeks to get this whole thing put together. So to get a grant for that kind of money for equipment and for programming and for, the professional development needed. So this is going to provide us with a business finance program, a career and technical program at North Kingstown High School. It will be the second career and technical program at the high school alongside engineering and robotics. And this program will allow North Kingstown High School to have students from other districts come in on a tuition basis to be a part of these programs. And our students will be able to get career nationally and Rhode Island-wide, acknowledged certifications in the field and be workforce ready upon graduation from high school, and they'll certainly be ready for college programming in these fields as well. So it's a really good thing. I also want to thank Dr. Manseri, Dr. Morse, Kevin Gormley, Joy Tavano, Frank Fusco, Cindy Norman, Mary Barnes, the members of the North Kingstown High School Business Department. So many people had a role in collectively putting to get this application together and putting this vision together. So I'm very proud of them and very happy for the high school and for this award. If one more thing, I would like to move item 5D, policies, under policy GCB, to the front of the agenda. We have a number of principals and directors here, non-unit staff here tonight, and the issue that they are here to discuss with the committee is about employee severance. As you know, there are roughly 600 employees in the North Kingstown School Department, and about 15 of those employees do not receive any form of employee severance. And it is my hope and theirs that the committee will take some action to change that to, have some kind of a severance similar to our teachers. And I would like to invite Mrs. Logan, with your permission, to address the committee.
Consent agenda first.
Do you want to do just a consent agenda first and do it after? Okay. All right, so we will hear you folks earlier than on the agenda, but we're going to do just our consent agenda items before that, if you don't mind, and we'll should be able to take care of that pretty quickly. So just some routine items. First, if I could get a motion to seal the executive session meeting minutes of June 4th, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Abstain.
Abstain.
Okay. And if I could have a motion to, Madam Clerk, do we have any executive session votes of June 4th, 2015 to disclose?
We do. At the June 4th, 2015 executive session, there was a vote which the school committee voted to uphold the student disciplinary decision of the superintendent.
Thank you. Items 3 and 4, we're going to put towards the end of our agenda because we simply recessed our executive session. It will convene again after, so we'll take care of those items at the conclusion. So we've reached our consent agenda. Do I have any exemptions from the consent agenda? Mrs. Avanzato?
Trying to figure out what, I guess it would be 4C, is that right?
Probably the other way around. C4?
Yeah, where are you at? Actually, 4C1,
Okay, so C.
technically.
Okay. C1, Ms. McGovern?
Yeah. D2,
D2,
E6 and 7,
E6 E6 and E7,
F1.
F1,
So
and Mrs. Avanzato?
E5 as well.
E5. Mr. Jones?
E2, please.
E2. So if I could get a motion to approve the non-exempt and consent agenda items. Do I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. First exempted item is C1. And Mrs. Avanzato, you exempted that.
I exempted it because I wasn't present, neither
Okay.
was Mr. Jones, so I guess I won't offer the motion.
Okay, so I'll make the motion to approve the executive session minutes of June 4th. Do I have a second?
Second?
We have a second. So we'll do a roll call vote. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
And
Abstain.
two abstentions, Mr. Jones and Mrs. Avanzato. And the next exempted item is D2. And Mrs. McGovern, was that yours? I'm sorry,
Yes,
I didn't write
that
who was
was.
who.
I was just concerned because a year ago, when the proposal for Davisville Academy was presented to the town council, there was not an inclusion of any expenses for furniture and technology separately. I do understand that there is funding in this, but it is a concern that this, again, was not presented in the startup costs and will reflect in the anticipated savings for the generation of this whole program at Davisville.
Any other comments on D2?
Motion to approve?
A motion to approve D2. Do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of D2? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
This passes 3-1. Next exempted item is E2. Who exempted that? Bob, Mr. Jones?
I did, motion to approve E2.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion. And a second, any discussion?
Yes, I would just say, I know we had the law change, and I know that pushed back the notification date, which I think was a good thing. You know, in the past, having to tell a whole lot of teachers and sort of holding them in limbo while the budget statuses were figured out. I just would reiterate my comment from before. I think our list was very long again this year despite that, and I would just ask the superintendent going forward if there's a way. I know always the budgets are in flux, but we can perhaps try and be in the spirit of the law and work to minimize as best we can the layoff and then thus the need for recall lists going forward.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving E2? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, unanimous. Next item is E5.
I would offer a motion to approve.
Second?
Okay, discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Dr. Auger and the administration for getting all of these votes in on the agenda prior to the summer. In the past, we had some issues, and it was difficult, and some of the hirings were into the summer, so just wanted to say thank you that they're on here early on.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving E5? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Next item is E6.
Fine.
Okay. If I could just get a motion to approve it first.
Motion to approve?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Mrs. McGovern?
So, again, this is another expense at Davisville that was not included on the initial spreadsheet.
That's not true.
I have the spreadsheet. It was not on the spreadsheet. There was no indication that there would be either any kind of principal or assistant principal at this building, or any additional personnel for janitorial services. Those were overlooked in the spreadsheet that was presented a year ago, February. In addition, in this budget, it was presented as an assistant principal. There was one FTE additional for Davisville as an assistant principal, and you had indicated that this salary was budgeted, but in fact, it is an assistant principal, not a principal. My concern is that this is another increase in the ever-growing number of administrators in this district when our student numbers are going down.
Sure. Our initial proposal for Davisville Academy had a principal in it. Over the course of the last 2 years that we've had the program in the D building, the school committee decided to use the assistant pupil personnel director as a principal, if you will. So that had changed. So if you're looking at a one-year-old spreadsheet, that's probably why it looks the way it does. This year, through the budget process, we did talk to the committee about the need for a principal in this program. We feel that is very important. It's the original vision that we have had, and the committee supported that for the number listed on your agenda in the budget process. And, I just want to point out, you can make comments about adding administrators. This program saves hundreds of thousands of dollars in out-of-district tuitions. So please include that part of it in the comments about, why we're doing this. This is a savings to the district by doing this a different way. If we didn't want to do this, I could give you the bills, exorbitant bills, for out-of-district placements for the same students.
Mrs. Avanzato?
I would just want to note that the school committee requested that Dr. Auger look at that. That was quite a while ago, a couple of years at least. So we asked that that be looked at. And I would also like to note that in the past, and I don't remember exactly when, Fishing Cove, we had special education students in Fishing Cove and no one else. It was an empty building. And there was a lot of concern, and there was actually a lawsuit filed with RIDE. It is extremely important to have a principal in a building where you have students that have special needs of one way or another. It's more critically important than at other schools, actually. And we ended up getting scolded, basically, on that, because we really dropped the ball with Fishing Cove. This was, again, many years ago. It's past history, but I just wanted to mention it because I think it's of concern here.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I just want to know why in the preliminary budget, there is an indication that says that there'll be an increase of 1 FTE in assistant principals attributable to Davisville Elementary, and not a principal. And when did we vote on making it a principal?
At a certain point in the process, we had a coordinator as language, we had assistant principal as language, and we had principal. I don't know the exact date that the term principal came to mind, but it is the appropriate term.
Hearing no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving E6? Aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes 3-1. E7? If I could,
Motion to approve?
a motion, do I have a second? Second. Discussion on E7?
I didn't want it to go on the agenda for consent without having discussed 6.
Okay, yep, it's definitely tied to 6. Any other discussion on E7? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes 3-1. Next item that was exempted is F1. I just want to note that if I could get a motion to approve F1 as revised, and the revisions were to make it a 3-year contract with a 1 with 1 2-year option.
Motion to approve?
Do I have a second? Second? Any discussion on F1? I already did, Bob. Any discussion on F1? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving F1? Aye. Mr. Jones, I didn't hear you
Aye.
say.
I thought we were doing a roll call, sorry.
Oh, we can, if you'd like.
Was that as amended?
As amended, yes.
Okay, I did put that.
And Mrs. McGovern, were you an aye or?
Aye.
Okay, all right, so 4 ayes, that means no nays. That is unanimous. That is the end of the consent agenda.
No,
Oh, did I miss-
G1. Oh, no, that was already, that was not
G1
accepted.
was not exempted. Yep, okay. Tell me if I missed something. Okay, that is the end of the consent agenda. With the consent of the committee, if we could move policy D1, which is, I know we have the number of principals here to speak to that, up a little bit to this point.
A motion to move to the current location.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Oh, wait, discussion, sorry.
Question? Yeah, thank you.
We're just discussing moving it, but,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah, no, and I think it's appropriate, and we don't want to, it's an important issue and thing. I would just say it would be nice if folks stay to hear some of the other topics of goals and other things that have great impact on the district, too.
Okay, any other discussion on moving it forward? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving this item forward?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So I know that, I believe anyway, that some of you wanted to speak to us on this item, so if you would like to come to the microphone, just please state your name and your position, I suppose would be the most appropriate for everyone.
Hi, my name is Ruth Ann Logan. I'm the principal at Davisville Middle School.
I'm Ed Ferrario, principal of Stony Lane Elementary School.
Marissa Eisner, assistant principal at Davisville Middle School.
On behalf of the North Kingstown School administrators, central office directors, and supervisors, we thank you for providing us with this opportunity to present our concerns regarding the disparity in retirement severance allocated to the North Kingstown School Department employees. Presently, we have approximately 596 employees. 581 of them receive a severance upon retirement. 15 of these people receive nothing. Tonight, we respectfully request that you demonstrate the same support and respect that you give 581 school department employees by awarding these 15 employees with a retirement severance that acknowledges their loyalty, dedication, and their expertise. Each of these 15 employees deserve to be treated the same as the rest of the employees in the district. It is also important to note that going forth, we want to ensure that we continue to attract top-notch administrators and personnel. We are unsure if we will be retaining the personnel that we have and attracting top-notch folks when neighboring districts offer a variety of severance packages that we do not. We are confident that after learning about the inequality of severance benefits which are given to the majority of North Kingstown School Department employees, that you will show the same respect for these 15 dedicated and knowledgeable employees and compensate them accordingly. These employees deserve compensation for their unused sick time and for their service time. Compensating them would speak volumes of your support and the confidence that you have in these employees. We are confident that you will address this situation. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. We can. We don't, I mean, anyone, I'll raise my hand and recognize myself first.
Just either go down.
Okay, so we can go down. I just wanted to make a comment that I think it's anytime we do a policy change, thank you for coming, and we've heard your side, and I think we have things to think about in addition to making any changes. So personally, I'd rather not actually make any changes tonight, though we certainly can discuss it. But Mrs. Evans, over to you.
I definitely understand your concern. When we deal with policy GCB, usually we take a couple of reads, we take a couple of meetings to talk about it, think about it. I don't want to put it off in perpetuity, though, so I'd like, to revisit it maybe in August. I'm personally inclined to do something to make the situation equal. It's not a huge amount of money we're talking about, and our principals don't retire every year. It's one every so often. It's kind of spread out. It's more of a morale thing, in my opinion. I don't remember what the change, why we made the change, or how long ago it was. I've just been on here too long. I can't remember anything. But
2008.
Yeah, it was my first year on here, I think. But I think it's going to take some time and discussion before we get there. So maybe we can revisit this at the August meeting, so it doesn't keep getting put off and not discussed.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you. I just have a couple comments. One, I do agree within the GCB pool that if an inequity exists, which it does, that needs to be corrected. I do think philosophically, though, we should separate the GCB and our administrators are not teachers. They're not collectively bargaining for their things. And so I think to sort of put things together which are either negotiated separately or come from a different population is something we should be wary of. I frankly think that we have moved in this district to a point with our administrators of recognizing performance and rewarding performance, to include a topic we're going to talk about later about merit pay, and that severance should sort of fall under that same principle. I am more a believer in sort of the deferred compensation principles you see in higher ed and other companies for administrators, and not to tie it to sick time, for the simple reason that, sick time exists for a purpose, and, an administrator or someone could unfortunately, due to no fault of his or her own, use up all their sick time for an illness or something, and then is left with no severance. And so while that's something with other employees has been collectively bargained and exists because of contractual agreements, I think with our administrators, we should move more to a principle that rewards effective performance and allows them to accumulate over time methods that when they leave, when they retire, they have built up, due to their performance, a severance that recognizes their performance. And I think we can structure it that prevents any inequity with other employees and recognizes unique situations, for example, of administrators who come over from the teaching ranks and rewards them for service they had in that and does not penalize them appropriately. But I would prefer that we address this inequity using the same philosophy we've moved to with merit pay and others, that administrators who have demonstrated effective performance, their severance, or what I would prefer to call deferred compensation, recognizes that. I would like to get away from tying it to sick time, though.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mrs. McGovern?
So, in my short time on the school committee so far, I have heard so many times already people refer to they do it so we should too, or they get it so we should too. It was all-day K, it was athletic funding, and now this. I raised 4 children and spent 28 years saying to my kids, just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean you should. So it really bothers me that we keep repeatedly hearing this as justification for doing something. That said, this group, to me, is more of an elite group who, if they survive their tenure in employment to retirement, should have some incentive, some reward, and I would be in favor of discussing this. We don't meet in July, so it'll be in August, or hopefully in August.
Okay. Thank you. And I want to thank you folks for coming. So, I think we're all in agreement that it's something we sort of want to have a little time to think about, and that we would revisit it perhaps at our next meeting. So, which, yes, and we don't meet in July, so, but thank you for your time. And so going backwards again, we go to unfinished business. The first item on unfinished business is our 2014-2015 school budget, which is our current fiscal year. And I know that there had been some talk about merit pay.
I think that's on the end of the agenda.
Well, there's two items. There's superintendent's merit pay, which is at the end of the agenda, because we want a complete discussion of that, and with respect to our job performance discussion. That we could talk about the merit pool in general at this point, because it's part of our current year budget. So, I guess we could start, I mean, it would really be a discussion of, if I could first ask Mrs. King, I think you'd mentioned at the beginning that the current budgeted amount in our current fiscal year budget for merit pay is $47,000 in the pool. But that does, I think we can give the superintendent some guidance as to whether to use that entire pool or not. This is Savanzato, or, someone, yep.
I'd like to make a motion to cap that at $37,500.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to cap the merit pay for the 2014 at $37,500. And Mrs. Avanzato, yes.
Just a quick comment, that is not less than what we had last year.
I don't believe so. I'm sorry, I don't have that exact number. It is more than what next year's budget is, because next year's budget was cut at budget time. I believe it's around the range of last year.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. Do I have any discussion on that item? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next is 2015-2016 school budget. First of all, just, Mrs. King, anything to report in general on that other than?
No.
Okay. So we have on the agenda specifically a discussion of athletic funding for the 2015-2016 budget year. Would you like to bring anything up with respect to that, Mr. Jones?
I would. So I know we had discussion last meeting, and I guess you can look at it two ways. I am glad that RIDE recognized our CTE proposal, and I look forward to us taking that money and the money we've matched and doing great things. I was just talking to a parent today up in Smithfield whose child has been part of the Smithfield Finance Academy, which is slightly different, but I think conceptually along the lines of what we intend to do, although I think ours is going to be more robust. But this parent had talked about how this child had been able to take 2 college courses and get a experiential learning through that. And so, while I know we were perhaps looking at if RIDE didn't fully fund us, having some money maybe to divert to athletics, I think it's great that if RIDE's going to recognize that, we're going to move out on that. I would say 2 things on this issue. One is that I know as a committee we've talked and we've heard about different priorities that exist around the district, and that we want to take a little time and look at those. And I know things happen over July, and when August rolls around, the superintendent will come back to us with hopefully some good news in some areas, and I won't say bad news, but areas that he has concerns about and maybe would like us to consider reallocating resource toward. So I would first make one motion because we've heard Mr. Mancini come here and mention some figures. I would say that I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that collectively those 3 teams have done to streamline and do the best they can. I'm sure they're talking with Mr. Haig. I would remind that we have also not funded some middle school sports, including one that I think 7 years ago the committee said that if it showed success, it would fund after 5 years. That's the soccer program, and that group has had to fundraise every year as well. So I would like to make a motion that tasks the superintendent to get with the people he feels appropriate and come back in August with what he believes is a correct number in terms of what we want to quote-unquote call fully funding athletics.
Okay.
For conversation.
And we have a motion and a second. I'll go first. I've all for having solid numbers. One question I've always had is, and Mr. Jones, you even mentioned it in what you just said, which is fully funding athletics in and of itself is kind of a misnomer that could mean different things to different people. But I think the gist of it, as I understand it, would be to give us solid numbers, and I appreciate Mr. Mancini's numbers that he's written, but I'd also like to hear from the administration on what the numbers that they feel would be sufficient to cover the two sports that, in particular, that we've been hearing about, which would be the gymnastics and the hockey program. But, I mean, say fully funding, that could mean a lot of things to different people. Mrs. Abbott?
Yeah, I guess one thing that I know that Dr. Auger is looking at and will be coming back to us at some point, or something we'll be considering anyway, is some of the cuts that we've made at Davisville, and I've expressed concern about that at the last meeting. But I think we have a little bit of homework to do on that also. I spoke to Principal Logan, and I would recommend that other members do the same, either in groups or not, and hash out some of the things we're talking about related to the middle schools and how they're structured and where the cuts are and that type of thing. In terms of the athletic funding, I would just like to see consideration given to gymnastics and also then I would say soccer. I didn't realize that was an issue until just this moment. But I support that general motion that you just made.
Mr. Jones? You started, but Ms. McGuff?
I also just wanted to make sure that when we get this report, it includes all the costs of transportation and referees and umpires and whatever kind of judges each sport uses, so that we can really see the total cost of the athletic program and the number of participants in each sport.
I would say that we can definitely show that. I really think transportation and the officials need to be separate because all sports have different numbers of games. They have games that are, some are local, some are not local. And I think that the meat of, and while I agree, you want to see the total amount, I still think that those two amounts should be separate in each category because otherwise you're not looking at like the meat of the expenses that are for each sport. Because if you're committing to a sport, you could have, multiple games. You could go to championship games this year and not next year. So that can tend to skew the total dollars. So I'll show it as, expenses, transportation, officials, and all other. I'll break it out somehow. And we have the number of participants that Mr. Haig gave us for last year as well.
Thank you. Dr. Auger, I know you wanted to comment.
Yes. Mr. Jones and I met at length with Mr. Haig, and the number that he gave to us at the time was roughly $38,000. But what I will do coming back in August would be an itemized list of what, that translates to, itemized per team, include, transportation, the whole thing. So you can see exactly, what it is that would be funded with that money. I just want to make a point that there are a number of different factors in play over the summer, and not the least of which is the enrollment at all the various schools and all the various grade levels. There's special education concerns that are always something that fluctuate over the summer. There has not been a summer that has not changed to some extent, one way or the other. So there is a lot to look at. There's also a lot to look at in terms of out-of-district tuitions. We have Jamestown, we have career and tech students, and we have charter schools. And, so we need to, we're keeping an eye on those numbers and seeing, what money is going out, what are the needs coming in terms of students at various grade levels. Will I need to add a different teacher at a particular school to cover an enrollment spike in some place? And I am concerned just in general with some of the moves that were made in the spring in terms of the staffing that has left us. And so I and my administrative team will be looking at that closely, and I plan on having kind of a comprehensive report for all of you about, what would it take with sports, yes, but also, what else is going on? How are we trending in terms of money coming in and going out, and what kinds of needs do we need to take care of in August in preparation for the beginning of the school year?
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Jones?
And I appreciate Dr. Ojay for clarifying that point, because I think that was sort of the expectation of the committee, and my motion is simply that I didn't want to lose the visibility of, A, athletics in that discussion, and B, because I think the committee is expecting a long list of what you see as either the needs of the district that have changed, or I'm hoping that some of the trends based on what we've done has moved some favorable items to our, however it nets out. I just wanted to make sure that we do have athletics as part of that, and because some numbers have been thrown around, and I know Mr. Hay did do a lot of work on that, and I believe he shared some of it, and he had asked for more time to provide a little more detail that we give all that. So I just wanted, my motion's really just to clarify that level of detail will be there as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Jones?
Yeah, thank you. So I did say I had two things.
Yep, sorry.
I do realize that, there's this level and this level, and maybe this is a little symbolic, but I do think, based on our previous meeting where we approved the administrator contracts and the detail we got from the administration, that based on what was budgeted versus what eventually approved, there was about $5,000 difference. I would make a motion, since that's FY16, that we reallocate that amount of $5,000 to the athletic budget for FY16.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Can you have it? You've got to talk here. You can't.
Well, I think I may, my point being is that I agree with the superintendent's point. We might have a big list of stuff. I see this as a small amount of money. I see it as a good faith token. I know it's sort of not, what obviously some folks would like to see us fully funded. I know we sort of took a step back of saying last time, we wanted to be a little hesitant. I would say, we know this is savings. We know we may have some larger amounts to spend, but that's going to require us to dig a little deeper. And I would say, for the amount of advocacy we've heard here, that it's a good faith effort to at least say, when we recognize a small amount of savings, we're going to put it in this effort. But we realize to fully close the gap, it needs to be part of the prioritization of all the competing demands.
Can I ask you, Mr. Jones, where you think this funding should go to? Do you have a particular sport? Because I've heard three up here tonight.
No, I would leave that to the administration to put it in the general budget and as part of the, administration's and plan of how they just allocate money to begin with in that area.
Ms. Samanzato.
Could you repeat again the source of the funding?
I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. King, but I thought you
Yeah, we took a look, and there were some differences between what may have been budgeted for some of the open positions we had. So we had, principal position open, we had assistant special education director position open. So there were a few changes, ups and downs from what we budgeted to where we know we're going to be now that those items are closed out.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then I will jump in. I've said before, and I'll say again, that if there's available money in our current budget, I am more inclined to put it towards educational needs, which include the issues that we have with reading and librarian staffing at Davisville Middle School at the moment. The flip side of that is, frankly, I don't think that $5,000 would do anything really to help in that regard. I don't know that $5,000 is going to make any effect whatsoever if we were to allocate it in that direction. So I mean, it's a really tough one to me. It's not that I don't support our athletic programs. It's not that I don't think that these are worthy athletic programs. It's just that when we have a very glaring educational need that is a direct result of budget cuts we made in the 2016 fiscal year budget, I'm more inclined to try to fix that first. Ms. Avanzato.
I totally understand where you're coming from, but the way I look at it, these are both things we had and we lost. You know, we cut funding to athletics several years ago, and now we're cutting reading and it's all, again, I'm going to say it, it's all completely unnecessary. We deserve to have our programs fully funded. I'm not going to quit till we get the Davisville programs restored as well. And that's my position, and I just think that we presented a fair, transparent budget of what our needs were, and we deserve to have that funded. So I'm going to offer an amendment to Mr. Jones' motion to increase that to $10,000 based on savings that we just realized tonight in terms of the merit pool.
The merit.
Oh, that's next.
Yes, different year.
So can I just say that $5,000 is not a lot of money. I understand that. And, you know, Mr. Mancini's looking for $10,000 is not a lot of money. But we haven't even started next year's budget yet. You don't know that you have $5,000 anywhere. We don't know what we might still need for staffing. We don't know what is in the pipeline for special education students coming in and out. We still don't know final what's in the pipeline for charters. We don't know any of that. So right now, we've taken this very small piece that we've analyzed and see that, okay, we looked at this and we might have $5,000. You don't know that.
I totally respect that. I completely respect, as the finance director, you saying that. But that happens every single year, and little by little, we're losing pieces of the system, of our programs. So I totally see where you're coming from, but I'm sure you can see where we're coming from. It's time for us to take a stand and say we deserve to have the programs funded and try to get them back. And if we have to go to the town council, they invited us to go to them if we had problems when they cut our budget. Additionally, on top of the cuts we already made. So I guess I'm going to have to withdraw my amendment because 2 separate years, and I'm not going to be able to amend Mr. Jones' motion on that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none on Mr. Jones's motion. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. So it passes 3-1. Any further discussion on the 2014-15 budget? Next item, sorry, I'm off an item, sorry, that was the 2015-16 budget. Then next item is CIP, existing bond and future bond. Anything to report? Mrs. King, no. And anything to discuss? Okay. Next item are policies. We've already discussed policy GCB, which was item D1. Next is our second reading of policy D2, IHCDA, the dual enrollment policy. Seeing it is a second read, unless there are objections, I'd ask for a motion to approve this policy as amended.
So moved. Second.
Second and a motion. Any discussion on this policy? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Also a second read on the changes to the foreign exchange student policy. This is also a second reading, so I would ask for a motion to approve the policy as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this policy? Mr. Jones?
I do. I had one small point. I'm not going to sort of, say it's something to hold up the policy about. I would say I understand the superintendent's rationale that he gave about exchange students not participating in our graduation exercise. I do see it as two separate things. There are students who are on a diploma track, and they must meet certain gates and criteria to participate in the graduation ceremony. And then there are students who are not on the diploma track, very few of them, who I believe should be able to share in, if they're a senior or that cohort, in that thing, with people being able to understand that they are not in a diploma track just because they're there. It just seems to me a little ironic that we invite an exchange student to come and participate in everything except the one celebratory thing at the end of the school year. When I think everyone can clearly recognize the difference between a student who may not be allowed to participate because of conduct or academic deficiency versus a student who would never be getting a diploma anyways and is here simply to fully participate in all the activities they can with their senior cohort. But again, if that's not the consent of the committee to change it, I'll just say I hope that we can make an exception to the policy as necessary if an exchange student requests.
Dr. O'Shea?
Sure. As Mr. Jones, explained my rationale in why that is written the way it is. I believe this occurred during my years as an assistant principal at Charahoe, and I'm not sure if it happened in North Kingstown. I think collectively now that's 15 graduations at the Ryan Center, so there's been a lot of them. But there have been years where we have acknowledged the foreign exchange students in the audience. So they come, they may even get a special seat near the class, but I do have a major objection to coming up, crossing the stage. That is a right that belongs to a graduate of North Kingstown High School. And as Mr. Jones mentioned, a lot of students come close, and they may have a credit to finish, or there's a requirement that isn't quite there yet. And often they will ask, well, can I just walk across the stage and get a blank document or a blank diploma? And we do not allow that. I'm sure there must be some districts somewhere that do, but most that I'm aware of do not. And the point is that that's a very special right that you receive when you go through the whole system and get the diploma. So we would reserve it for that. But I have been witness to some very, cordial and touching, acknowledgments of foreign exchange students who are sitting, whether it's near the class or, at the graduation ceremony and an acknowledgement in the ceremony. I think that's perfectly fitting. I would stop there, though. So when you talk about participation in the exercises, I would not include crossing the stage or receiving, really anything in that regard.
Mr. Jones?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Dr. O'Shea, because that's a little clarification on what's in. I took this language to be very rigid in terms of not being present. So I would fully concur. If we're recognizing their presence, that to me is participation. So I just thought the language was very rigid, but if that's sort of what you're saying, I would fully agree with you, that if we're letting them be there and acknowledging them, that would be great.
Okay.
Ms. McGovern?
Dr. J, what is the frequency that we might expect a senior foreign exchange student?
We've had, in the last 4 years, the last 2 years, one of them has been 7 students, another one has been 8 students.
In the senior class?
Yes.
Wow.
And the years previous to that, I think it was 5 and 6 were the numbers. Not necessarily in order, but like that, But, the concern is, we've certainly cut back on a number of elective courses and streamlined our staffing at the high school over the years. I'm concerned about spots in classes not being available to North Kingstown students because of a wide-open acceptance policy for foreign exchange. And also in terms of the time that can be taken for staff to, ramp up students, for guidance counselors who do a lot of extra work when they're dealing with a foreign exchange student in a foreign family. There are districts in Rhode Island with policies where they don't have any acceptance. So I think having a cap at 4 and some clear parameters about what the students need in order to be successful, I think is a smart way to go.
Ms. Zamazano?
I
I just wanted to say thank you to the superintendent for bringing this to our attention, because I think this is an important policy, and it reserves, it allows for the experience of the foreign exchange student while still reserving the resources as we cut down and we have fewer resources available to the citizens of the town. And that's really important. So it's kind of nice we didn't bring it up. You brought it up, and I totally agree with it. I'm also happy they'll get to participate in some way. I think that's perfectly fair.
Any further discussion? Remind me, did we get the motion? I lost track. Mrs. Clerk, Madam Clerk, do we have a motion on the table? I don't remember if we got
There
one.
is a motion to approve and a second.
Good. Okay, thank you. Lost track on that one. So any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next items are items up for new business. They are for discussion only. We can speak to them, but we wouldn't be able to entertain any motions as they are new business, though we could certainly revisit them at a later time. Item A is the 2015-16 school committee goals. Anyone like to speak to this? Mr. Jones, I assume?
Yes,
It was your
absolutely.
item.
Thank you. I would start my comment going that I think we need to revisit this point about for discussion only. We're not in concert with Robert's rules in that aspect. I understand why it was there before, but I think we as a committee need to relook at that point. Having said that, I think it's right that, as we look to the end of the year, that we as a committee at least have a public discussion to start talking about the areas that, in the aggregate sense, we would like to see the district and obviously the superintendent start to consider as he thinks about his goals and his vision and the things he wants to accomplish for the district. I would first start off by reading to the committee something we just approved, and that is this language that says, "The school committee affirms that students should have access to a personalized learning experiences that are experiential, blended, flexible, and differentiated. And as a result of these experiences, students will have greater ability to control the pace, place, and content of their learning experiences while meeting state and local requirements." I think one goal we as a committee need to do is put some now real action and initiatives behind that language. I think that the state is moving out, and it's pretty close. The Board of Ed, or the Council on Secondary and Elementary Education, probably over the next couple months will approve the new state master plan for education. I think it's perfect timing for this district, considering our strategic plan expires this summer, to look out and start a holistic conversation with the community and with all our administrators and staff and faculty and students to really think about what we want, looking forward for 5 and 10 years. I think the district has made a lot of gains, and our first thing we should hold on to those and continue to do what's working. But I think we're also at a cusp of saying there are some things that the district can really be a leader and innovator in the state for. We're doing some things like the CTEs, the clinical day program. I think one of the next areas we really need to be a leader in is this notion of really personalized learning for students, and really giving them the ability to have a differentiated education, to recognize that there are students, when we talk about career and college readiness, that aren't going to go to college, and that we need to set them up for success in the workplace if they're going to go early. And I think even for students going to college, recognizing that the higher ed environment is changing, that it's a world that expects more experiential learning, that is moving to a more online and differentiated and blended type of instruction and experience, and frankly, give students more control over the pace of their education, and we need to start doing that with our own students here. And so I think, would hope one of the goals the committee embraces is really adopting or putting as a goal a plan for the end of next year that puts some real vision and then correspondingly objectives and initiatives to make that plan a reality. I think there's a couple other small things that this committee addressed, and Linda, you kind of hinted at it, that the previous committees had to chip away at some things due to financial constraints in 2012. It's time to revisit either creative ways of restoring those, whether it's funding, whether it's different ways of doing things, whether it's coming up with some creative ideas, but to me, things like the start time and other things, it's time that we as a committee relook at restoring those things and different options for doing that. And the third thing I would say is, we've had initial discussions. It's time to move out in terms of the long-term vision for facilities and the corresponding infrastructure that matches the vision we want for education as well. I know the superintendent and others have started moving out on that, and I think it should be a goal that we really move that ball forward, especially as I see the state opening up in different ways, funding for creative ideas, whether it's dual enrollment, whether it's re-envisioning how the construction aid is going to do, and that we be poised to position the district not for 5 years from now, but for 10, 20, and even 30 years from now, and that needs to start sooner than later.
Mrs. Avanzato.
We have, as a school committee, typically met at least once a year in the summertime in an informal way to discuss school committee goals and or just general topics. It's an advertised meeting, a little less formal, and I think we could use one of those to discuss some of these issues. Secondly, before I talk about some of the ideas that Bob said, I just wanted to say, in terms of splitting the agenda the way we usually do, having new business and unfinished business, requiring something to be on twice before we actually vote. That began, and I think it is actually in Robert's rules, if I'm not mistaken. But I know it's in our policy as a school committee, and we can change anything we want in Robert's rules. So it is a school committee policy. We could revisit it, but I like that idea on a lot of the larger issues. Maybe on some smaller issues it's different. We've had closures of schools on the agenda once, and we were reprimanded for doing that. Not that we would do that now. I don't think that would even happen. This was many, many years ago, well before Dr. Auger would not think of doing that. I realize that. But just there's a fairness to allowing the community to know what we're talking about when it's something significant, to have it on two agendas. So I would like to keep that for the really important things that we're talking about, like start times if we're going to put it on a public agenda, like say, God forbid right now, I don't want to do that. I don't even want to talk about that right now. Too many other things to talk about. In terms of the experiential learning and those kinds of innovations, I think they're great to discuss, and I think we obviously need the guidance of the administration to inform that discussion and also our goals. But I certainly support what Bob is saying as far as we need to get together and talk about these things and also do some long-term planning in terms of facilities, because it's been mentioned where we may try to build one middle school, a green middle school, and do some creative things with the buildings, which will be, extremely, we'll have to have a lot of planning around it. We'll have to have a lot of discussion and a lot of input from the public and from everyone in the district. But the discussion should start.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mrs. McGovern.
I think that having a current strategic plan is very important for the school committee, and if our strategic plan is expiring, we really should make that a priority to gather together a committee to get started on that and set a pretty short period of time that people, number one, have to commit to participating in and getting this plan in place so that it will guide us as we move forward.
Dr. O'Shea?
Sure. We normally do an update on our strategic plan over the summer. It becomes part of the administrative retreat, and members of the public and school committee are invited at that point. We have a lot of good group, the proper group there to do that. But Mr. Jones, in putting this on this agenda tonight, was kind of anticipating something that Mrs. Avanzato said. We still do plan on having a school committee session to go over goals in August, and that will also be roughly the same time that we're looking at the strategic plan. And ultimately, the new 5-year or 3-year, I think strategic plans go by 3 years, will be in front of the committee for your approval after that takes place. So you'll be invited to the larger table and as a committee have a chance to weigh in on that. And so it's good that these conversations are happening at the same time right now. And I would concur with the points made on the stage tonight in terms of facilities, in terms of start times, in terms of personalized learning. I think all districts are looking at the personalized learning piece. You know, now that we have students with full access to the internet and Chromebooks, and our teachers are being ramped up, you know, it just kind of exponentially makes for opportunities. Not to mention a new push from Governor Raimondo that we just approved tonight, a dual enrollment piece that is, you know, looking to get students more college experience even before they get to college. So there are a lot of new horizons out there to look at in education. I think it's smart that we do. Facilities long-term, that is something that's been on our agenda this year, and we plan on following through with that as we go forward. And certainly, you know, I've already talked with our facilities, our transportation director, Mr. Horn, about, you know, what ideas he may have in terms of ways to find a better way to make transportation so that our start times can be later at the high school and earlier at the elementaries. And hopefully we can find a way to get that done this upcoming year. And there'll be probably a few other things that we talk about in the meantime over the summer. So,
Any further discussion on item A? Next is item B, allocation of unrestricted fund balance. Mr. Jones?
Yeah, this is a discussion we've had with Dr. Ojea and Mrs. King, and since we can't make a motion, I'll just say it can move to unfinished business in August. The point here is that, you know, we have this fund balance that accrues, and sometimes we make decisions to spend that, and, you know, one of the things we should always be wary of is what's the opportunity cost of when we do it. And I also think that our, you know, based on sort of informal guidance the town council has given us, that we should spend from our fund balance at a certain point, it would be useful to have sort of non-binding, obviously, for the unrestricted fund balance, but buckets that the administration recommends to us where we should at least designate the fund balance to go to. And, you know, the example I would have is, I think last meeting where Mrs. King said, you know, we're at the point we need a truck, and if it has to come from fund balance, it would be nice if, you know, over time, we have been at least on paper allocating funds towards that, you know, an athletic capital reserve, clearly technology. And so if we have these sort of designations done, if we make decisions to remove them, we're at least understanding where we are sort of robbing from Peter to pay Paul kind of stuff, and that it aligns with our strategic planning, that if we know we need transportation, you know, 5 and 10 years out, we're at least trying to allocate money. You know, when we go to the town council and say technology costs us this every year, we can sort of show how we're budgeting for that. And you know, maybe I'm a product of the town meeting concept in Vermont where, you know, you would vote on, you know, allocating $200 a year to the backhoe, right, to build up all those individual funds. But I think it would be nice if we sort of at least have some kind of way of showing the buckets we know we have needs for and kind of proportionally where we have funds for that over time. Again, realizing that it would be non-binding, obviously.
Any further discussion on this item? Thank you. Next is item C, the ninth grade Earth Physical Science Mastery Exam. Mr. Jones?
Yes, thank you. That's mine as well. I raise this issue because I see it as an equity issue, just like we've had discussions about athletics and other things. And the reason this sort of brought to my attention was, I know it was in the program of studies, but we really didn't have a robust discussion of the program of studies this year. But I find it difficult to comprehend in an environment where we just talked about students having different ways of attaining mastery, that we had a mastery exam where students at the honors level, that's what came from Mr. Powell in the response we got back from the high school, who demonstrated competency, and yet we say there is no credit attainment for that. That students who, simply because they have the ability earlier to show the same level, that if they sat through the course for a semester or 2 semesters, depending on the course, and demonstrated the same competency at the end of the year would get credit, that students who are able to show it now do not get credit. And I just find that just troubling, that if we are not talking about placement exams, we're not talking about, you know, sort of demonstrated level of aptitude things, when we are actually talking about proficiency of a course, that we do not also say it should be credit worthy. And so I bring it up as new business, and the superintendent and I have talked about this, and I know he'd like some time to, obviously, it's a larger discussion because to me it's a precedence about other things we may do, but I at least want to get it to the committee's attention to go, we cannot have a system where students show proficiency and do not get rewarded for it, yet having to sit through a class and wait until the end to show the same proficiency, get rewarded for it. I think it's really counter to the direction we are trying to move of giving students greater flexibility to show competency and attain credit for that.
Dr. O'Shea?
Sure. I want to, make a point about this practice. I don't consider this something that we should be ashamed of. We have examples of this, and most high schools do, for instance, in math. If students are at an honors level in math at the middle school, they start at an advanced level in math at the high school, and that allows them to take advanced maths, even to calculus and AP level coursework through their high school years, whereas if they didn't start at that point, they may not have gotten that. They don't get any credit for taking algebra in the 8th grade, but they do get the benefit of being able to take advanced coursework, which is, obviously recognized by colleges and by employers as a desirable thing for students to have. So they do get a benefit from doing that and having kind of this advanced status. We have similar situation in foreign language, and this is a version of this in science. Students, from all of my experience, and I'm sure, the administration at the high school, Mr. Powell is here as well, the idea that a student would leave high school with starting at biology, going to chemistry, taking physics, and then having the opportunity to take more advanced coursework in science is a lot better resume for that student and a lot better learning experience than starting at earth science and finishing, say, at physics or chemistry, or even worse, in my opinion, not really having a full year of earth science, having, passed a test. I understand that, but now, what I think would be definitely damaging is if we say that counts as a science credit, and now you can take 2 more sciences, say biology and chemistry, and be done. That would concern me. So the point of these mastery pieces and being able to move up is precisely that. We're not taking away learning experiences, we're enhancing them, and we're making students all the more prepared for the world that awaits them. I don't see a problem with this issue, but it is something that I think can be looked at when we looked at the personalized learning piece in the fall next year as part of these goals, that whether this is something, a course that a student takes online, or other kinds of learning experiences. Like I said, there are lots of new ways of learning and lots of opportunities for coming as students, and this is a version of that. And so I think we need to be thoughtful in terms of how does that fit into the larger puzzle. And I would hate to say, okay, we're going to give students credits for this mastery exam, and there are several other examples of things just like this that we don't touch, or we've just done something that has this unintended consequences that no one at this table could foresee because we haven't consulted all the right people in the pipeline. So I think we should, take this one slowly as part of the personalized learning piece and see where that goes from there.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you. I guess I would point out a couple things. One is that language is not required to graduate in the state or in North Kingstown. So the fact you take Spanish 1 means you start in Spanish 2, I see as a completely different situation. On the math piece, our program of study says Algebra 1 or geometry. So the fact you may take a placement or a test in 8th grade means you go to geometry. The program of studies is algebra or geometry, not right? They're not distinct things. In science, it specifically is a distinct course that says earth science. Now, I agree with you that, advising and saying if you have an aptitude for that and you want to take a lot of science, you should do that. And, maybe these mastery exams for credit should go to electives and not the science thing. I think that's all worthy of much more discussion. My philosophical point, though, is to say that a unique course that is specifically listed for credit in the program of studies, students should not be treated differently because they show mastery one way versus mastery in another. And whether telling it's an elective or we start doing that, I think it sends the wrong message. I also think it sends the wrong message that if we give good guidance to parents and students, they'll figure out what they want to do. I have this issue with math. Not everyone wants to take 4 semesters of math and take it their senior year. And it's something that we should allow parents a little more and students flexibility to decide. But I guess from the equity perspective, I want to make it clear that if it's a unique course in the high school, that we should not be discriminating how you show mastery if we have decided that there are alternate ways of showing mastery. So I agree with the superintendent that, it requires a lot more thought and discussion, but since we moved out and gave the option this year for students, maybe we should have had these conversations a little earlier. But having said that, I do want to make the point, credit should be credit and not sort of going just because we're fearful that it might put you on a track we don't necessarily think is good for you. But we should be leery of not recognizing that. We should treat students equally who demonstrate proficiency that we have said, that the administration has said, demonstrates competency to attain credit.
Mrs. Avanzato?
Yeah, just briefly, I understand the concerns that Mr. Jones has, but I think the superintendent's discussion about weaving this into the larger picture of what we're doing with curriculum in this area is important. Maybe there's another alternative. This is something that's within the purview of the administration, in my opinion, not really something that we can dictate or should dictate. However, maybe there's another option, like showing that the individual took the test or something on a transcript, rather than, because once you give credit, then it's going to change the entire track of a student in terms of how many years they have to take of each course and all of that. And I know that that's governed somewhat by RIDE, and also the districts make these decisions that we don't have any program in place right now for kids to get out in junior year, although I know that's being done in some places around the country. I don't think we're there yet. I understand his point, but I don't think that we can treat it differently than you're treating the other areas, course areas that you discussed. I don't know if there's a middle ground.
Any further discussion? Okay, thank you. We have reached reports. Do any members have any correspondence they'd like to submit? We have a special report, an item of disposal notification, which is in your packets. Any standing or subcommittee reports? Ad hoc committee reports. Also in our packets are the fiscal year 2015 financial reports. Any comments on those?
Yes, thank you for providing.
Yeah, I
Mr.
have one-
Jones.
Oh, well, it's my fault. I'll ask Mrs. King after, just one comment, so it's not.
At this point, then, I'd ask if I could have a motion to recess our open session and reconvene our executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 4246-4 for a discussion of employee job performance pursuant to the superintendent. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. We are recessed into executive session. We will return open session after.